controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a science here to make things make sense.
All right, so I am here with Dr. Baland Jalal, who is a famed neuroscientist. He's a researcher at Harvard. He studies sleep. He studies sleep paralysis, something that I'm so fascinated by and have had a lot of experiences with. People who listen to this pod know I have a lot of weird dreaming things that I'm very curious to pick his brain about. Thank you so much for coming on the pod.
My pleasure, and thanks for the generous introduction.
Absolutely. I'm first so curious, and I'm sure you get this question on everywhere you go, but I am curious. How do you get into this field of work? How did you get into studying sleep paralysis in particular? I just want to know how you go from being a kid to being like, yes, I'm going to study this thing that some people are terrified of.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I mean, for me, I guess it sort of started with my curiosity about the brain and psychology and why we do what we do as humans and things like that. Actually, if you go back to school, I was I got really poor grades in high school. Wasn't a really good kid back then. And, in terms of grades and school and stuff. But then, I got curious about the brain and psychology and behavior and things like that. But what really got me into sleep paralysis and stuff was my own sleep paralysis episode. So one morning I was lying in bed, seemingly sleeping, but then I felt something's on my chest, pressing on my chest. And, I got terrified and I realized, my God, am I awake or am I sleeping? What's going on? And I could sort of see the room around me. And I realized I'm awake, but I'm physically unable to move. I'm paralyzed. Mm-hmm. So I tried to scream like, Mom, Dad, get me, but I couldn't. And, soon I realized, it feels like there's some demonic creature in my room. So it felt very evil, vicious. And then I saw my legs flying up and down. It was a really terrifying experience I had. And so from there, I was really the next day. So, what do I do? And so with my track record in school, not, being the black sheep in the family, I couldn't go tell my parents, look, Mom, there was a ghost here, what do I do? Go tell my friends, I grew up in a tough neighborhood. I go tell my friends, look, I saw a ghost. They think I was crazy. So it was really weird. And it was the early days of Google. So I Googled a little bit, but, what do I Google? I saw a ghost,
Yeah. You just assume, there was a demon in my room.
It was a demon. And the thing about it, what made it really striking was that it felt very real. This conversation that you and I are having right now, it feels real. And that was the same thing. And it felt so compelling. And so from there, I just got curious and I realized, well, later on, there's something called sleep paralysis. And, it's this condition where you're paralyzed, unable to move or speak. So you're kind of sleeping, but at the same time, your mind is awake and stuff like that. And so I had to study it. And I had this shift around, right after high school where I sort of got really curious about, as I said, about the brain and psychology and things. And I just went all in and I was really passionate about science at that time. Everything changed. When you study something out of passion and curiosity, it's just different than when you have to study it in school and stuff.
Totally. So then it just drove you to continue studying it.
Yeah. You just studied on your own and you just get books and you read and you write and you want to do research and stuff. So it was incredible.
That's so cool. Also, really, I'm curious because my first experience with sleep paralysis was so similar. And I feel like when I looked it up online at that age or shortly thereafter, I found similar stories, like that same idea of waking up, feeling like you can't move, but you're in your room and everything feels normal at first, but then having a sort of presence. In my version, I had seen someone standing at the end of my bed who then came to sit on me, and then I was trying to scream. The same exact story. Is that sort of the typical thing? Because I feel like there's even artworks from hundreds of years ago that kind of represent this demon sitting on people's chests at night.
That is exactly right. I mean, it does have this, certain, the fabric of the experience does sort of cut across cultures and things like that, where people will see the same thing in terms of this shadow pressing on your chest coming from the corner or hearing footsteps, So all of these things does have this, it's very robust all around the world. But then at the same time, there's a cultural layer too, meaning that, depending on where you live in the world, and our research has shown that, you can add additional details to it. So in Italy, you might see a shadow-like being. It's usually faceless, but then it can also be a witch, like an evil witch, or like a cat-like creature. So we found that. And in Egypt, people will talk about like the evil genies of Aladdin. So it does. So it's interesting. It has that layer of like, shadow-like creatures,
Mm-hmm.
beings, footsteps, pressure on the chest. You feel like something is holding you down and things like that. That is all there. But then you have additional cultural details, and we do explain that in terms of the brain. We can try to make sense of why that's going on. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
It's so fascinating. I'm curious, in the first place, how do you go about studying this? Because obviously, at least my anecdotal experience is that they happen intermittently at random times, seemingly to me. So how do you get people potentially in a lab to have an experience like this? Or is it self-reported, or what's the way that you're able to actually study what's happening?
Exactly, it's a great question. So in terms of sleep paralysis, it is self-reported. So what we've done is extensive research on people, just interviewing them, asking them. And this is usually what you do when you study. Well, with dreams, you still sometimes wake people up with dreams and things like that. But it's this when it comes to things like subjective experiences, it's usually done by doing these interviews and things like that. So yeah, it's intensive interviews with people, asking them what they see, what they experience, and then looking at symptoms and trying to make sense of it in terms of the known neuroscience, and come up with hypotheses, and yeah. So
Would
that's how we do
you,
it.
in your dream world, would you be able to get a brain scan of somebody while they're in the midst of one of these experiences? Like, do you think that would ever be possible with future tech that maybe is less invasive, that somebody could have it recording them each night, and then who knows, when they have it, you might be able to get some like body measurements as well?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. So there's been done EEG, like EEG, meaning there's been looked at brain waves simply to see what the brain state is like. That's of course different from like imaging and things like that. But and it does show you that sleep paralysis is really this condition where the person finds himself at the borderline, at the interface between sleep and wakefulness. So you have elements of wakefulness there, and you have elements of the dream world, REM paralysis, sort of, wrestling with each other. And you really see that activity really nicely with EEG in the sense of the how it looks in terms of the recordings. But it's not. So yeah, it would be really cool to have someone like have sleep paralysis while they're in a scanner, and potentially even while they're hallucinating. I mean, that would be the dream, wouldn't it? It would be
Yeah.
really cool to see that, and it should be doable. I mean, people do seem to be able to induce these things on their own. Some people, I mean, we're talking about people that have it often and can sort of self-induce it in some ways, and through like sleep deprivation, you can also have triggered in various ways. So it is possible, but it's slightly tricky, but possible.
Are there people, like, what would be a regular frequency for someone to have this? Do you have them on a regular basis, or are they more just sporadic? Like, or are there some people who have them like every week, or how often does it happen?
Oh yeah, yeah. So for me, it's sporadic, right? So I had that episode. I've had like maybe once or twice a year. I'll have one randomly. But yeah, there are people that have them like 7, 8 times a day. I've spoken with people with really severe sleep
Oh my
paralysis. Have
gosh.
them, yeah, yeah. So where it's really, really frequent. And we've tried to apply various therapies to see if we can reduce it. So definitely, there are people with
Okay, so
who have that.
in some conditions, then it is almost like someone is probably wanting to figure out a way to work through this because it's actually maybe invasive in their life in a way that's like actually negatively impacting them.
Absolutely. So it's pathological. It becomes what's called a parasomnia, and that would be called reoccurrent isolated sleep paralysis. The technical term meaning that they have it's sort of disturbing their life and stuff like that. So yeah, that is very possible. And we did a study actually in patients with narcolepsy. So narcolepsy is this condition where you will fall asleep during the day suddenly, right? And you can also just fall on the ground and be paralyzed all of a sudden during normal daytime. So it's quite a terrifying thing in a way, right? It's very debilitating. And so people with narcolepsy have typically sleep paralysis as one of their core symptoms. So they will have sleep paralysis very often.
Hmm.
And yeah, we did a study on them, and we found that by using a therapy we've come up that I developed, we were able to reduce sleep paralysis in the small patient group. It was a pilot by about 50% after 8 weeks, and some of these people had sleep paralysis very frequently, and so 8 times, 10 times a day, in
Wow.
some cases. Yeah. So for some people, it can be really really something really debilitating. But what I'll say is that it's interesting. You can have no sleep paralysis your entire life, and then suddenly you have one that's just life changing. And that's what I find fascinating, right? So your entire life, there's no sleep paralysis, there's nothing. And then you're sleeping one day and boom, you're lying there paralyzed,
Yeah.
unable to move, speak, and you see some demonic figure that just transforms your entire life. And so certainly have a lot of those people that called me, maybe people that were stern atheists or something, and then they saw this and then, my God, what's going on? I was
Right.
visited by a human. What happened? Dr. Jalal, could you help me? So we have that too. But I think that's really compelling, right? That you can have people with these experiences that just bothers them and are so surreal.
So, can we talk a little bit about what is actually happening? So, even for somebody who just has it one time, can you walk us through what's going on in the mind or the body that's actually triggering this, so people can understand in that moment that maybe, that knowledge sometimes is power when you're having it happen?
Absolutely. Especially in this case, I mean, it can be really helpful to know what's going on. So when we are sleeping, we go through different stages of sleep, right? So one of these, stages 1 to 4, just sort of, your body is slowly shutting down, and then it goes into a stage where it sort of repairs itself. It's called slow wave sleep. And then you enter into the stage called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And during this stage, you have vivid, lifelike, and crisp dreams. So these are very, very bizarre, strange dreams you have every night. And these dreams are typically forgotten. So 95% of these dreams are, forgotten by people, and they tend to be really strange. So you find yourself in all these you're transported into this world that's just bizarre, right? Places, people are warped. Everything is just warped. Now, occasionally you can wake up during REM sleep. Now, mind you, you are paralyzed during REM sleep, where you have these dreams, and this is a mechanism of your body to prevent you from acting out your dreams and hurting yourself or your sleeping partner. So your brain says, look, buddy, I'm gonna paralyze this person. And so this occurs in the brain stem. So in the lower part of the brain, there's a system that paralyzes your entire body during dreams so you don't act out these strange and bizarre dreams. Very good. Okay, very good. All right, and then at the same time, you have a center of the brain that's responsible for wakefulness. And this is the cortical regions. So in this neighborhood of the brain, you have sort of wakefulness, perception going on. Now, during sleep paralysis, what occurs is that your perceptual part of the brain, wakefulness part of the brain, becomes activated, even though you are still physiologically in REM. So on the one hand, you are paralyzed in REM, potentially dreaming in the REM phase, and then your brain, your cortical regions, your perceptual brain becomes prematurely activated. So you end up with, as we mentioned, this blend of wakefulness, wakefulness, and then the paralysis of sleep. And so when these two worlds clash, you have this unique experience of sleep paralysis, almost like augmented reality, as if I'm pulling this world of dream over your eyes, so you are awake, but you have the dream world projected into your environment. So that's what's so intriguing about sleep paralysis, this clash of worlds, right? One, the subjective world of dreams, which is bizarre, strange. I mean, think about it. You have all these experiences that are hallucinations. Every night you're hallucinating. These are hallucinations. Your brain are making up these stories in your brain, right? They're delusional. These ideas are really strange and delusional, things you wouldn't believe during wakefulness, right? So you can be Shakespeare in your dream, or you can be on the moon. Right. Everything is crazy, right? But yet you have all these delusional thoughts. And you're demented as well, right? You have dementia. You forget them when you wake up. So you are in a strange and bizarre world, and suddenly you have all that, spilling over into real life. So that's
I
It's
find it
along that.
so fascinating. Like, what an interesting part of reality that is this sort of combined. And I know, like, different works of fiction kind of talk about that space between like dreaming and reality and what is real and why aren't our dreams real, or are they, just as much a part of your brain doing something that's a normal function? So why is
Yeah.
it? I have a question though about sleepwalking. So obviously we're typically paralyzed. Is sleepwalking then a sort of does that happen during REM, and is it maybe also considered a disorder where you are not paralyzed by accident?
Yeah, great question. So sleepwalking, I often get that question because it's like related, right?
Hmm.
So what happens with people that jump out of bed and jolting themselves out of bed and jump out of the bed, or just start sleepwalking and walk around in their house, and in some cases will start their car. I mean, this is known in the literature, right?
Hmm.
So they will start their car and drive while they're sleeping. So very dangerous, or
Yeah.
jump off the balcony. In fact, my younger brother, he told me just recently that when he was a kid, and my mom saw this, he was playing soccer on a roof. We were sleeping on a roof. We're back visiting the Kurdish region of Iraq with my parents. I'm not sure if I was there, but we were kids at the time. And he went on a roof. We were sleeping there because it's really hot in that summer. And so he started playing football while he was sleeping, or something like that. So really crazy. So sleepwalking. What's going on? So sleepwalking occurs during one of the stages called it's not non-REM sleep.
Okay.
So if REM is the stage where you're paralyzed and can't move, you can't speak, then during non-REM, you can also tend to wake up and be aroused mentally and start walking. So that is typically what's going on. It's one of those parasomnias, arousal parasomnias, meaning you wake up during the non-REM stage. You're not totally awake, but you're not obviously not lying down
Right.
anymore. And so it's a really creepy thing. There's other versions of this, like there's a version of so-called sleepwalking called sleep-related eating disorder, where the person will wake up and go to the kitchen
I've seen
and
videos of this online. Yeah.
prepare food and like cut food and cut their fingers
Oh my
occasionally,
God.
in frozen foods and stuff. So yeah, it can be really terrifying.
I'm going to tell you about something that happens to me, and I'm curious if you will have, had experiences like this, or have worked with patients or clients. So I've experienced sleep paralysis a handful of times where, yes, my mind or eyes open in my room, but body is paralyzed, and had sort of that scary experience. But more often now that I've aged, I call these night terrors because they're typically scary, but not always, where I will wake up and be in reality. And I don't think that, sometimes I think I'm moving in bed, but I'll start to look around the room and see things that aren't necessarily there. Sometimes I think this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I'll talk to things that are inanimate as though they are communicating with me, like even just a door. So, and then I'll remember it the next morning, but in that moment, it feels like really real. Like I'm awake, and with my partner, Greg, like sometimes I'll wake up and be like, we got to get on the bus. And I'll see like a bus in our room. And then he'll be like, what? And suddenly it will be gone. And I realize, oh, and I like slowly go back to sleep. So it's almost as though like I'm not always paralyzed. Not that I'm moving around all the time, but there have been times when I've sort of gotten up and I thought I was talking to someone in the basement, and just having these sort of like dreams in reality, seeing things that aren't necessarily there, but they feel very, very real, and I can see them, and I'm not dreaming, because then when I snap out of it, I'm in that same space without those dream elements. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So yeah. You see, the thing is, this world between sleep and wakefulness, sometimes there is that, this gap in a way where you can find yourself. And what you're talking about is called sleep related hallucinations. So
Okay.
it can be a condition, obviously, if you have it, in a frequent chronic way, but you have it once in a while. So don't worry about that. But yeah, it's these hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, medical term for hallucinations that occur because you are at the interface between sleep and wakefulness. And so even though it's not technically sleep paralysis, it's not REM sleep that's paralyzing you and you're waking up. It's just non-REM. It seems like if you can move, it's non-REM, right?
Yep.
And so you wake up during non-REM, but your brain is not fully, awake yet. And so what can happen is that, centers of your brain can become prematurely activated that has to do with wakefulness, but yet you're sleeping. And so, yeah, you have these hallucinations. And so people see bugs crawling on the
Yes,
wall.
that is what it often has been, will be like giant spiders. And maybe perhaps in some of these cases I might be paralyzed and just I'm looking around and I don't know, but it's often really scary things like that. And it maybe only lasts for a few seconds before I like jump and get out of bed and then I'm fully awake realizing, whoa.
Well, absolutely. You don't have to have sleep paralysis. So you can have these hallucinations in the absence of like the sleep paralysis episode, just during non-REM. And
Right.
actually, there's another one that's really quirky. It's called exploding head syndrome. It's
What?
it's a really exotic name, right? But it's just you're lying there and between wakefulness and sleep, and suddenly you hear this boom, this crash, as if a plane just crashed in your backyard. It's really terrifying.
Yeah.
It can be really terrifying. It's either shocking, and people will wake up often and think, oh my God, I'm having some medical condition, and so they will seek medical attention. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you hear like a bomb dropping on you while you're sleeping, and it can sound like that.
Terrifying, yeah.
Terrifying, yeah. So you can have all of these things are really, really interesting in terms of various experiences you can have, dissociation, out of body experiences. So I've seen a copy of myself hovering over me, Baland, copy of Baland, and I'm having this conversation, and typically the conversation is who's the real Baland, the guy up there or the one here. So we're sort of debating that, and you can get hostile, obviously. We both want to claim the identity, right? And the reason, by the way, this occurs is that, the sense of self, the sense of I, me, the land being anchored in this body is something that the brain creates, right? So there's centers in the brain, typically around this area, okay? So it pulls information from different sensory modalities like vision, seeing, touch, tactile sensations, and it creates a sense of you. So in that structure. And during REM sleep and some of these phases, that part of the brain will not work as it should, right? So it go out of whack, and because of that, your sense of self will be disrupted, and you see a copy of yourself potentially, or you can have an out of body experience where you leave your body and walk around. And yeah, it has to do with the bizarre world of sleep where the brain is compromised in these ways.
Yeah, it even makes me think of, and I don't know if you do any research or touch on lucid dreaming, where it is another angle of that element of being self-aware in a dream, like sort of breaking that reality where suddenly you're realizing you're dreaming, but you're not waking up, and so you can maybe control your dreams, or at least experiencing them in a more visceral way that's memorable.
Absolutely. So lucid dreaming it can occur during sleep paralysis. Hence my interest in that and the research we've done. So people can have lucid experiences during sleep paralysis, and the reason is really that if sleep paralysis is your mental sensorial system waking up while you're in REM, in a way, lucid dreaming is your mental, part of the brain becoming activated while you're still safely sleeping, so to speak, right? So think of it this way: there's frontal region. So human beings are very proud of this frontal region. It's the head office, right? It's the CEO of the brain. Everything is controlled there, our thought, decision-making, logic, and stuff. Now, in that structure, you have a region called the DLPPCs, which is a fancy name for a structure where we put the world together in the logical, serial type of way. Now, that part of the brain, when it turns, so during dreams, it's turned off. It doesn't work as it should. And that's why dreams are illogical. You see everything is just messed up. That's the reason. That part of the brain goes to sleep. In fact, people that have damage to that region of the brain will have intact dreams, even though they're totally compromised during the day. They have brain damage. But their dreams are just like you and I, like our dreams. So it shows you this part is really responsible for the illogical nature of dreams, right? But occasionally, while you're dreaming and in your bed sleeping and dreaming, that logical part of the brain, the self-awareness part of the brain, self-agency part of the brain will become activated, prematurely. And so you will become like a wakeful person, but still dreaming. And so you will typically have the ability to know that you're dreaming, and sometimes even be able to manufacture your own dreams, right? Create your own wonderlands, do whatever you want, fly and stuff like that. So,
I've been lucky enough to have a few of those times too. I know some people, I guess, like try and actively pursue lucid dreaming and see it as a means to even maybe just have fun, or maybe think about and spend the nighttime doing things they wish they could be thinking about or doing. I'm curious, back to sort of like sleep paralysis, but just the neuroscience of sleep and that intersection between wake and sleep, what your take is on what can we learn from it? And is it for you, is it mostly just interest based, like what is happening? Or do you think there's a place for us to learn about these moments and see them as opportunities? Or, some people take lucid dreaming as an opportunity to do things interesting that they could not do in the real world, or to spend more time thinking about things they don't have time to think about in the normal world. I'm curious if you think, on the one hand, it's just like a bit of an aberration or a result of our evolutionary biology, and so it's just there, or if it's for something, not for something else, but you know what I mean, if there's another way to contextualize it.
Absolutely, it's a great question, and there's multiple ways to sort of think about it. I think lucid dreams per se does give you that creativity, allow you to sort of take items and objects in the world and sort of play with them in a way that you normally wouldn't, right? Because you have the fabric of reality of dreams, which is all sort of it's very lucid, it's very fluid, so to speak, right? You have that, and at the same time, you have the logical ability of your brain to sort of to do things. So I think it's important for creativity and could spark creativity. So that part is there. In terms of dreams overall, dreams do have a function I think, just in terms of allowing you to, so when you are wakeful, you are more focused and you have very narrow logical thinking, right? So when you are in the dream world, on the other hand, your brain will wander more. It will be more, because of the CEO being weakened, right? Because it cannot sort of dampen and the logic is suppressed, right? And so it allows for more creativity and test new ideas and be more sort of open in that way. And so I think it's important for creativity. I think that would be the key take-home message. And also, I think about it in this way too, like, during dreams, you almost dress rehearse for real life. So you run scripts, you run scenarios, right, in your mind of things, of future events. And even if it's not exactly those events, similar events that will lay down circuits that are useful for when you encounter similar situations in your life. So it does have these benefits, and certainly I would say, let me give you my own subjective point of view, because I remember as a kid growing up in as I mentioned, a tough neighborhood and stuff like that. My dream, I always wanted to see myself flying. I wanted to fly, right? That was my big, like Peter Pan's be able to fly. So just leave my, the place where I was living at, and just being able to sort of roam all over the place and just do that. And so I would tell myself each night, and mind you, I didn't know anything about lucid dreams. I was a kid. I was very young. Mm-hmm. And so I tell myself, okay, when you dream, remind yourself that you are in a dream and do things and explore the world of dreams. I would say this every night. And then one day it just happened. I realized, my God, I'm dreaming, and I know that I'm dreaming. And I started to run, and I started to fly. And this experience had a great impact on me. I mean, it was a dream, but I was a kid, and I saw these landscapes beneath me, like green landscapes. And I felt like, my God, the heaven here that I'm sort of flying around the skies is almost like a Sistine Chapel, beautiful, right? I'm here, and it just had a very liberating and emotionally positive impact on me. And it just, for me, it was a reminder that in life, stuff are possible, that you can do things if you really want. You can achieve things. And for me, that had that meaning as a kid. So,
and so visceral too, to stick with you for so long.
It's very difficult. To this day, I have that, memory of that very, very compelling dream. So,
I wonder, as somebody who, thinks about and studies sleep so often, and, sleep is such a huge part of our lives, and yet it's often sort of relegated to the side, and everyone wishes that they could sleep as little as possible so that they could be more productive. Do you feel that you have a different sort of perspective on waking life versus sleeping life? And, I think there's sometimes a conversation around, especially from the sort of philosophical point, we identify so strongly with our conscious thought and with our logical thinking, and yet we experience these other forms for potentially 8 hours a night, not that we're dreaming for that amount of time, but where our brains are going through so many other things. As somebody who's in this field, has it changed the way you think about who you are and who people are in general?
Yeah, it does. It does change. I mean, I pay more attention to my dreams. I analyze my dreams. I try to make sense of them. Like, for example, I give an example. I had one dream where I was having a conversation with somebody in my dream, right? And it was a really meaningful conversation. And I was like, my God, who's this? Who am I having a conversation with, right? Why is it so meaningful? And then he told me a joke, and I started to laugh. And I laughed so hard, that I woke myself up from laughter. But then I thought about it as a science, and I said, look, if this guy is a projection of myself, in fact, he is myself, and I'm having this conversation with him. And so who am I having a meaningful conversation with? Who is this person that I'm connecting with? And then if he's telling me a joke and I find it funny, a joke's only funny when you don't know the joke. I mean, that's the whole purpose. It has a story plot and there's a punchline, right? And if you know the punchline, the joke is not funny anymore, right? The tension is sort of no longer there. So was I suppressing the information of the joke to make it funny to me, right? In order to sort of have a dialogue with me, what's going on? Does the brain have all these layers of complexity? Or what about dreams within dreams? So I have had those where I was in a dream and then I realized, my God, I'm dreaming, but then, this was actually a different dream. So it's like went different layers. I always had
Inception.
Inception, right? It was real life inception going on. And how can you, like, what circuits are being activated? What's going on? Or I have dreams. So I have a certain dream at point A, and then 3 weeks, so I forget about it, right? And then 3 weeks later, I'll have the same dream sort of reoccur, but I forgot about it, as if your brain is only remembering your dream within another dream. Like there's a circuitry for dreams. So yeah, this whole thing, I do certainly think about it, and it does make me, ask all these questions.
Is there any research that you want to do yourself, or in an ideal world, if you could capture and collect anything, like what is it about, whether it's sleep paralysis or just sleep in general, that you wish you/the human race could understand more about?
Oh, it's a good question. There's so many things. I mean, it's tough for me to like pin down like
sure.
but like things that we're thinking about doing, for example, with my colleagues, are things like so imagine so what is time perception like in dreams? So when you're dreaming and you're lying there sleeping, is time slowed down? Like is it faster than real life? How do you perceive time? So example could be if I'm walking, right? If I'm dreaming and I'm having this dream and I'm sort of walking in the forest, right? So this is my dream, and then somebody would know, the scientists would know that you're walking in your dream, or at least you're dreaming, and then they would pour water on you, right? So they would pour water on you and wake you up. The question would be now, if you were to wake up, would you report that I was dreaming and then a tsunami hit me of water? Or would you go like, oh no, I was walking in the forest and then the clouds came out, I took up my umbrella came out, and then the water, and then it started to rain. The question is how do you perceive, how do you create time in your dream? So that's an interesting question, because, and this is the point here as well, we do know that outside influences can influence and infiltrate your dreams. So if you're sleeping in a cold room, you might feel like, oh my God, I'm in a in the winter in Toronto, for example. It's cold.
Don't remind me.
Exactly, right. So you could have that, or if there's some smoke, outside from a grill, somebody's grilling outside some barbecue, right? And then you're smoking, the smoke is coming inside your window. You might dream that you are in a fire or something like that. So we do know that external forces can infiltrate your dream, but the question is, how do you incorporate these things into your narrative? And how does it influence the fabric of reality, including things like time? So these are all questions. Or somebody with OCD, for example, will he see nightmares of himself washing hands over and over? And what's the content of dreams? So all of these things are not, some of these questions are not known. I'll tell you this: during COVID, it turned out people had a lot of nightmares around washing excessively and things like that. So what about people with social anxiety? Do they see themselves having nightmares? Is that a recurring theme? So all of these, there's a lot of interesting questions in science that are interesting.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I know you brought up earlier that you had sort of invented or created a technique, especially for sleep paralysis, I think in general. Was it called meditation relaxation therapy? I think I looked that up properly.
That's right.
Do you think that's sort of Not that there has to be an end goal for your work, but in some ways, is it to understand the mind and then, work towards solutions that can sort of help people, especially in these scenarios where these, quote unquote, conditions might be intruding in their lives?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I think there's two elements. One element is the theoretical, like what's going on in the brain. Why do people hallucinate? So this is a great interest of mine. Why would somebody see a ghost? Why is it faceless? Right? Why do people see faceless shadows? Right? I mean, why doesn't the brain create a face all the time? Hallucinate that. So that I have theories about, and so that's on the one end, like all the theoretical, interesting stuff. And then on the other hand is the clinical applications. How do we help people with these conditions? And how can we create like really simple therapies that people can use in their daily life in the most simplest of ways? And that's how the meditation relaxation therapy came in. I thought, look, you're lying there. In fact, I was lying there. This came from my own experience. So I was lying there having sleep paralysis, and I went, look, I'm sleeping. Okay, so this one, I'll tell you this. During one occasion, I was lying and sleeping during sleep paralysis, and I said I wanted to test my ghost theories in a way, right? I thought, what happened if I tried to imagine the presence of a ghost, so activating mental imagery. So but I just couldn't do it out of fear. So that I wasn't able to complete. But from these seconds of awareness, I simply thought, well, look, we can really sort of intervene and do something. If you are awake for seconds to minutes, well, then you have cognition and you can potentially do something about that. And so I started to play around with these ideas and test it on myself, and then eventually on patients and things like that. So yeah, started with myself, and then
the best place to start to just experiment on yourself, especially if you're experiencing it firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's definitely true.
I have a random question that's related to myself. Do you think that, because I did a sleep test maybe a year or two ago where you go in and you get all the stuff stuck on you and you have to sleep in this place, and did find out that I have a mild sleep apnea. And I've noticed oftentimes when I have these sort of night terrors or sleep paralysis, it does come with like my heart racing and sometimes out of breath. And I've been wondering if maybe those are connected, like perhaps I'm also out of breath because I stopped breathing for a few moments or for minutes at a time, and maybe those connect, that like biological response connects to what's happening in the brain, which makes me have a fear response, which potentially ties into these other things. I didn't know if that has ever been connected through research or not.
It's a good question. So breathing is elevated during REM sleep. So if you have anything, so breathing is automatic and it's elevated. And that's why, in fact, you feel like something is crushing on your chest during sleep paralysis when you try to control your breath. So if you try to control your breath and there's an automatic thing, like an automatic pump going boom, 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 it's automatic, then that you're sort of interfering with the natural respiration. So that could account for that. And yes, certainly like things like when you have sleep apnea and breathing issues, that can cause anxiety, and that can feed into sort of fear, activating a what we call a sympathetic response, a fear response, leading to an elevated heart rate, sweating, fear, panic. So all these, do certainly go hand in hand. And yeah, that's what I say. Look, forget sleep paralysis or any of these sort of terrifying fear-inducing conditions, they come with panic, right? And that panic feeds back to the brain, and that's one big issue. And a key part of my research, what we're finding is the more that you fear it, and the more you have panic, fear and panic will then taint and color the way you see the world, and potentially even your hallucinations. And so it becomes this vicious loop. And let me illustrate this with the little Lisa example, because if there's anything in my research, you asked me about my research earlier on the sleep paralysis part, and if there's anything about my research that has been most sort of surprising, or the punchline of much of what I've done, is this idea that culture, in a way, your fears and beliefs around sleep paralysis can impact it in a profound, major way. Meaning, so we compared like cultures such as Italy and Egypt, where people have fearful, exotic understandings of sleep paralysis. So sleep paralysis, as we mentioned, is like a witch or like a giant, like a like a demon or something like that, versus a place like Denmark where people see it as stress or anxiety. Now, if you live in that culture with that all that exotic stuff, the fear stuff, what happens is that that will then make you more likely to experience sleep paralysis. And so if you're told by your grandmother, your name is little Lisa, you're told by your grandmother this ghost will come at night, attack you, choke you, suffocate, all this stuff will happen. You go to bed, you haven't had sleep paralysis before in your entire life, but now your brain is primed to actually look for sensations of paralysis, wake yourself up during paralysis, and then you will potentially hallucinate the cultural stuff that's been put in your mind, right? And so then you wake up the next day, you interpret that in the light of your culture. So my culture says it's a demonic thing. You become even more terrified and anxious, which then leads you to have more sleep paralysis. And
that is so fascinating. That is so, I mean, it makes sense once you say it like that, but it is so interesting to think about how much there's like these sometimes subtle, sometimes not as subtle, like underground cultural implications that can impact us even while we're sleeping. And even while we're in this weird in-between version of sleeping, it's so interesting to think, like you said, in Copenhagen, it's seen as more of a stress response. And I guess that is sort of a means to an end as well in terms of therapy to know, okay, there is a way maybe to minimize the impact of it if you can disassociate the fear from what is happening. Like if you understand, hey, this is just a normal biological thing that happens sometimes. There is not a demon. I am not under major threat other than just having a dream. Then maybe it's not so bad.
Absolutely. That's the thing, right? So there's two elements. Element one is the cognitive mental piece. So you tell yourself it's not dangerous, it's not terrifying. So you correct that through a sort of what we call a top-down correction. Your mind is telling you, yourself that it's not terrifying. So that intellectual element. And then there's the physiological response where if you so that's the part of the therapy, you meditate, you sort of try to push yourself into a relaxed state, even though all this is going on. And then that can potentially break some of these cycles of fear and autonomic arousal and, panic. That's natural. It's almost like, meditating in the middle of like a very stressful work situation. Mm-hmm. So you'll teach your body not to become aroused and fearful. And so, and then in turn, that fear will not project back to the brain. So we're trying to cut all these, vicious cycles that could lead to the worsening of sleep paralysis. So I've definitely thought about all these things and find ways to sort of get around them by this therapy. So definitely.
Wow. Well, this has been so interesting. I wonder, as just a final question, is there anything that, through your research or through studying sleep paralysis that we haven't touched on that you find really fascinating or feel that we should talk about before we go? Or, sometimes I'm just thinking like, oh gosh, there's probably so much I don't even know to ask.
Yeah. No. You've been great. You asked really, really good questions, very insightful questions. So I love that. Is there anything? No, I mean, here you're lying safely. So yeah, I guess this would be the final part. Probably would be like to think about here you're lying safely in your bed, seemingly right, sleeping, and then suddenly there's this ghost in front of you. You're terrified, right? You're scared. It's outer world, sort of eerie, bizarre, surreal experience, and then potentially through that and the fear associated with that, you could potentially even develop some kind of trauma because you're seeing that and your brain is telling you it's dangerous, it's terrifying. And some of our data, our research really seems to suggest that, you could potentially even develop a mental illness out of this. So let me give you a concrete example of this. So my colleague out in Boston, he looked at people who were, understood sleep paralysis as space alien abduction. And when he measured their physiological responses, like sweating and things like that, when they were, hearing the audio recording of their own, stories of what happened during their sleep paralysis or their space alien abduction stories, what their understanding of it, their physiology was as reactive and as intense as somebody who came back from war, somebody with actual PTSD. So it shows you that potentially these experiences can be traumatic, potentially, and could lead to things like anxiety and depression, which our data also seems to suggest. So, your lying sleep, your brain can be very imaginative and could potentially lead you to, if you're not really, doing something about it early on. And so, yeah, the mind can be a very interesting place, but it can take you in dangerous directions if you're not careful. Yeah, the human brain is vastly more mysterious than I ever thought before going into, neuroscience, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it brought up one more question for me as well is, do you, because often certain mental illnesses and things can be genetic. Have you found a link? I am only thinking out loud about this because I know my dad has, when we were younger, described similar experiences, and only as I learned about later in life sleep paralysis and these kind of things that I have, I'm realizing, oh, he would wake up and see a man at the end of his bed, and he always told this story of how traumatizing and scary it was, and he woke up my mom, and she was like, there's nothing there, what are you talking about? Do you think, or have you seen that it's genetic at all? Or are there certain trends of the people who tend to have these types of experiences happen to them?
It's a great question. So absolutely, there seems to be a genetic factor. It tends to run in families, and there seems to be a gene that has to do with the sleep-wake cycle. So if your sleep-wake cycle is out of whack, then genetically, and that's what you see in narcolepsy too, right? So there's a genetic component, it seems, but we need to do more research. But people that are anxious, people who are stressed out, so hyper stressed,
me.
Right? So people that have sort of stress and anxiety and things that would cause sleep to become fragmented. So think about it this way. So if you're going through these cycles every night, right? You go non-REM stages 1, 2, 3, 4, then you go into REM, right? If you have anything that can cause you to sort of tilt out of REM prematurely and activate, something that causes arousal to your mental mind, so you sort of decouple REM from wake. So you have this decoupling going on. So everything, substance abuse, obviously alcohol, all these things that fragment REM can push you out and lead you to have sleep paralysis. Trauma, things like that, definitely can lead you to. And when I go travel, if I go on a lecture tour, anything like that, and I'm in a, my sleep is slightly messed up, I might end up with a sleep paralysis.
It's more likely. Episode. Huh. I never really, because it happens intermittently enough for me. I've never really tracked, but I feel like I should keep a journal and then, associate the things, what is happening around the times, because it might just be, maybe I'm really stressed, maybe I haven't been getting sleep, maybe I've been drinking, or, not really realizing the things that can impact it. I know I said this was the last question a moment ago, but it just made me really curious, even for my own personal self, about the therapies like you mentioned, and it sounds like it's around that sort of relaxation, particularly if it seems to be more anxious people having these kinds of episodes. You found success in, just focusing more on, that a meditative state, being relaxed, not being as, stimulated, because I feel like anxious people are always overly stimulated by things. Is that the direction of the therapy?
I think so. Yeah. So in terms of the sleep paralysis therapy that I've developed, exactly that is the idea, right? So it has the element of the first, when you have sleep paralysis, that we say to patients, don't close your eyes, right? Try to close your eyes to avoid any distractions, and then tell yourself. So this is the cognitive, mental part. Tell yourself it's merely sleep paralysis. Right? And then we say, and as well, emotionally distance yourself from it by telling yourself, well, look, since it's just sleep paralysis, there's no reason to be terrified and fearful. Right? So we have that emotional component. And then the key part is the meditative attentional focus part, where you focus all your mind on something extremely positive. So this is an element that's known in therapy that is used, emotion centeredness. So I think, with my entire mental focus on, I don't know, my mother's face or whatever it could be, right? So you think about that, and the idea is to sort of, your attention is scarce. Attention is a scarce commodity in your brain. And so you recruit all the attention away from all the negative, fearful stuff. And then what it does is it potentially can redirect your brain, into a more positive state than the danger part, and then finally we say, don't try to move. This is the fourth step. Don't try to act out the paralysis. And I'll tell you why. Now, this is very interesting. The reason is, when you are paralyzed in REM sleep and you try to move, we believe that can mess up your body image or the sense of self centers in the brain. So I mentioned in this part of the brain, you create a sense of self, right? So when you try to move during REM sleep and during sleep paralysis, your brain will send commands to your body: move, Baland, move, get out of here, right? And what it usually does, it CCs, sort of like copy an email. It CCs this part of the brain and says, look here, look, buddy. Create a sense of Baland based on the information that will now come back from my limbs and my body, right? So that's how I normally create a sense of self. I move my arms from A to B in space, and information goes back to this region and says, oh, Baland is out here in space.
Yeah.
This is how I'm being created. But during sleep paralysis, you're sending all these commands: move, but there's no feedback coming back to that part of the brain. So what it does, like Google autocorrection, it will fill in the blank for you, we believe. So it sort of goes, oh, since we can't see any leg moving, there's no feedback, let's create that sensation, or let's create a sensation of your body floating out in space. So your sense of self gets all messed up. Is that clear?
Yes.
I just want to shout technical on you, but basically what you're doing by sending all this feedback to move, but no feedback coming back telling your brain how to move, your brain goes into a panic state, and it hates these sort of incongruent situations and sort of fills in the blank for you. And so we say, don't try to move, don't try to do any kind of movement, just relax.
Right.
And
just
so
kind of like wait till it passes, just know what it is, and that it, wait till it's gone.
Very eloquently put, exactly. So you do these steps, and then hopefully it could be helpful. So definitely.
Wow. Well, I'm sure there are a handful of many people listening to this who've experienced it. Hopefully no one who has it too much, but if they do, now that's something I'm going to try. I might be a little embarrassed to admit this, but I am an anxious person, and B, I'm like, I think I'm a little bit like afraid of the dark, and sometimes I feel spooked at night, and I think maybe that leads to those moments of, if you're going to bed and you're a little anxious or a little afraid, maybe it's more likely to happen. And I feel that it's more likely for me when my partner's not here, because I feel like there's a sort of safety when you're with somebody else. I know there's lots of studies on, whether you sleep with somebody or alone. Sometimes separate can even be better because you're, not being bothered. But for me, I find like that comfort of knowing nothing can really be dangerous if there's somebody else here, or if my dog's in the room with me or something like that, I feel a lot better as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense in terms of the safety element. If you have anxiety and fear, and if you can sort of buffer that by having somebody in your room with you, certainly that could be
a bit of a buffer.
Yeah, a little bit of buffer, right? Whether it's your dog or whatever it is, right? So having something to make sure that you don't feel alone. I've had interesting cases, of sleep paralysis, but one that's interesting is the idea of people sleeping with their lights on. Fascinates me that people go that far, right? So
yeah.
For years, we'll say for 20 years, I always had the light on so the demon wouldn't come.
Wow.
Oh my God. So
that's unreal. Well, Dr. Jalal, thank you so much for taking time to chat to us about all this. It's so fascinating. And just everything about it makes me so curious. I feel like there's still so much for humans to figure out about sleep and our brains and how they work. And it's really, really awesome to get to chat to somebody who's sort of on the cutting edge of learning those things. So I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
My pleasure. It was very fun. My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, where can people check you out if they want to follow you or see more of your work?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Baland Jalal. I'm on YouTube, maybe Dr. Baland Jalal or something, but on Instagram, on YouTube, a little bit on Facebook. So yeah, those channels be the easiest.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone so much for listening to this week's podcast, and we will see you all next week. Bye.